my auntie asked me, so Alexia, what do you want to be when you grow up? You know, the classic question to a little child. And I answered to her, much to her shock. I said to her, Auntie, I want to be a lawyer when I grow up so that I can judge my parents.
Nice.
I got very, very disillusioned about what law can achieve. And about, okay, you've issued the judgment. It's perfectly drafted, or, you know, as perfectly as it can be drafted. But, you know, the UN lacks an enforcement mechanism other than, you know, the Security Council voting for a resolution, or the GA voting for a resolution, you know, adopting measures for the implementation of the judgment. And so there's no police in the state structure that we are accustomed to in Cyprus. You have Cyprus government, you have Cyprus police. If the law is breached, the police comes after you. There's no international police that's going to come after you as a state if you don't enforce a judgment.
On today's episode, I'm speaking with Alexia Solomou, a lawyer and partner at Spencer West Cyprus. Alexia has 15 years of professional expertise in international and EU law, in a variety of international organizations, law firms, and universities, including the International Court of Justice, the European Union Agency for Asylum, and the University of Cambridge. She specializes in the field of technology and data protection with an emphasis on artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. Alexia, welcome to the Future Makers podcast.
Thank you, Annetta. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm so excited for our conversation today.
I'm really excited too. So, first question. Kierkegaard says we understand life backwards, but live it forwards. When you look back at your early years, what do you see now that prepared you for the role you have today?
Thank you so much for this question, and I'm going to answer with a story. I was about the age of 4 when this story happened. I don't have a recollection of it, but my aunt does. And so I know the story through her. And so we were in her garden at her house in Limassol. She's my neighbor, so we live on the same street with my aunt. She was, you know, plucking her rose trees, and I was there like hanging out after kindergarten. And my auntie asked me, so Alexia, what do you want to be when you grow up? You know, the classic question to a little child. And I answered to her, much to her shock. I said to her, Auntie, I want to be a lawyer when I grow up so that I can judge my parents.
Nice.
And, you know, a few observations about that. My parents were going through a divorce at that time. So I perceived that there was a situation that was not entirely fair or not entirely just to me and my environment. And 2, I had no clue of the distinction between what a lawyer is and what a judge is, because obviously a lawyer cannot judge you, but a judge can. So I had, like, let's say, an intuition as to what I would, you know, eventually do as a profession from a very early age. And I had a sense of justice since then.
Nice. And you mentioned Limassol. So is that where you grew up?
Yes, I grew up in Limassol for the first 18 years of my life. I went to school there, and then I lived abroad for the next 13 years before returning back to Cyprus.
Nice. And how would you say, like, growing up in Limassol kind of shaped those early years? And then I guess moving abroad as well. How do you kind of see the spaces kind of blending and, you know, giving you a sense of direction and where you have ended up today?
I mean, Limassol is the place I was born and grew up, and it's very dear to my heart. That's where my family lives, and that's where, all the principles and values that I hold dear and fundamental up to this day were shaped and formed. At the same time, especially when I was a teenager, I was preparing for university, I knew that there was more out there. And my aim was to come out of the small city and experience the big cities where I ended up living later, like London and New York and Paris.
So you moved from Limassol to
London.
Oh, nice. Yes. Big transition.
Yeah, it was a huge transition. And, in the contrast, you can see where you're coming from, where you went.
Yeah.
I went from at that time, Limassol was a small provincial town to a metropolis.
Yeah.
I did my law degree in London. I actually did a dual English and French law degree at University College London and Paris 2. And so my first move was to London. And I remember how big everything looked. It was the big city, so many people, different nationalities, the hustle and bustle of the heart of London where my university was. It was quite overwhelming at the beginning to take everything in, but with time you adjust to it and it becomes part of you. I consider that I became an adult in London. That's the place where I grew up to be an adult, because literally at the age of 18, honestly, you're just a teenager.
You're a child.
You're a child. You have no understanding of how the world operates or how things function. And so I transitioned, let's say, into an adult during my law degree between London and Paris. Yeah.
Before we go any further into more your adult life and how, going into your working life and into how you became a lawyer, can we just pause and just go back to the woman in your life as you were growing up? Did you have any mentors? Did you have anybody you were close to or looked up to, or even any rivals? Who were the women that were kind of shaping you in those early years?
Before university?
Before university and maybe even after.
So before university, you grew up in a family. Yeah. So the women in my life were, of course, my mother and my two grandmothers. So the matriarchs, let's say, of the family, they were all strong figures. When I was growing up, all of them very hardworking, with a strong faith, good human beings, instilled really the values that I hold on to up until this day. So definitely, up until the age of 18, my family, and then afterwards, things shifted, and I now have a mentor. It's not a woman, it's a man, but he has been my guiding light throughout my career. I actually worked for him for 3 summers at the law firm where he was partner, called Garvey Schubert Barrer in Portland, Oregon. So that's how I spent 3 summers as a law student, and we keep in touch up until this day with my mentor. Yeah.
The woman in your life, your mother, your grandmother, who did they want you to become? You've already mentioned the story. You, as a 4-year-old, that you were already on your path to becoming a lawyer. How did that kind of narrative kind of continue? And what were their reactions to this dream?
So, first of all, I remember my mom always telling me, Alexia, no matter what you become, I just want you to be a good human being.
Lovely.
At all times. When I was a teenager, talking about Kierkegaard, I wanted to study philosophy, actually. And I remember there was a lot of conflict in the house as to the employability prospects of
a philosopher.
One studying philosophy. I mean, we don't live in the era of Aristotle anymore where you can be a professional philosopher, right? And so as a teenager, I wanted to study philosophy, but my mom, I know she saw through me. She insisted that I study law, and I'm glad she did. For many years, I thought she was wrong, but it was the right decision in retrospect, because I literally found my calling while studying in law school with particular subjects such as international law and EU law. I discovered my passion in life, really.
Were there any other lawyers in your family?
Not in my immediate family. I have actually an uncle who is a lawyer, but he lives in Athens. So he doesn't live in Limassol. So I didn't have somebody around me in the immediate proximity that I could, go shadow in the summer or something. I would just see my uncle from time to time, and I would hear, about his profession. But, I remember, in Cypriot school, like you're supposed to take a week out from school in your final year and go do the profession you think you want to do. So I did mine at a law firm, obviously. And I saw how the courts worked, and it looked so unfamiliar at that time. It was a new world that was opening in front of me. I remember being present in a case with the former Assistant Attorney General of Cyprus. And, for me, the advocacy, the rhetoric of the legal language was quite impressive at that time when I was at that age. Yeah, it impressed me.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you went to study. You studied first in London and then
Paris.
Yeah. London, Paris. What was your first job out of law school? Tell me about that. And then let's talk about power as well. What did you learn about power at that job? About your own and...
So just to clarify, I did an English and French and law degree at Paris and London, and then I went to New York to do my master's in international law. I went to Columbia Law School in New York, and so my first job out of law school was at the International Court of Justice. And how did I end up there, you may ask? So at Columbia and at various U.S. universities at that time, there was a program. It was called the University Traineeship Program, whereby each university, there was 8 at that time when I went, which was 2010, that would fund a year-long judicial fellowship at the International Court of Justice. Now the program has changed. It has changed form and means of funding, but that's how it was structured at that time. So in 2010, I was the student chosen from Columbia Law School to clerk at the International Court of Justice. So I literally went from New York to The Hague, just landed there.
I mean, you went from Cyprus, which I doubt 90% of the people even knew where it was, to London, to New York, to
The Hague.
The Hague.
Yes. Brought the circumstances this way that I left the territory of the US and came on European ground to The Hague. So now the first job, I was a judicial fellow at the International Court of Justice. In other words, I was a law clerk. And I basically worked for the president of the International Court of Justice at that time. And so that involved two, let's just say, sets of tasks. The first one is the judicial one, so doing research into the cases before the International Court of Justice. And the second one, the president has a lot of, let's say, PR obligations, so a lot of speeches to deliver in various fora, such as the UN General Assembly and other agencies of the United Nations, and also a variety of other speeches, universities and other international law conferences. So these were the two main tasks, and that's what I did for a year.
How old were you at this time?
So this was 2010. So I was 23, 22 going to 23. Yeah.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you learn about power during that period? I mean, you were a 23-year-old Cypriot woman in the heart of the States.
Yeah. So what did I learn? When you work at the International Court of Justice, you see how judicial decision-making takes place and how judges reach their judgments or conclusions, and how they construct what we call in law the ratio, the rationale, let's say, of the argument. And also, you see judges, debating between themselves as to how to reach a specific decision. And international law, I've come to this conclusion many years later, actually, is international politics dressed in legal language. It's another way to put forward international politics arguments dressed in the legal language, because there were two parties. So the International Court of Justice is an interstate court, so it's state versus state. So many times instead of you had a team of lawyers on each side, the applicant and the respondent, and many times the first person who would make the argument for a specific state would be the prime minister of a certain country, or the minister of foreign affairs, or the attorney general. So the issues were high stakes, and so the language had to be very finely crafted and very carefully crafted in order to put forward the claim of a specific country who deemed its rights to have been violated. So, the argument side, but also the judgment. This applied to judgments as well. How do you draft a judgment so that it will be received by states, and therefore the draft went through multiple stages of drafting and redrafting. And I remember this particular instance. I remember as a law student at Columbia, when I first read my first judgment of the International Court of Justice, I was thinking, there's something missing in the logic of this. There's like a leap in the logic there. I was never fully satisfied with the way the majority judgment was constructed, but I understood why it was so when I was there, because it's as if many cooks are cooking the same dish and they're stirring the same pot. the text goes through, there might be 15 legal minds working on, and there are 15 legal minds working on one text, and therefore everybody, all the 15, in order to vote in favor, had to be happy with the final text. And the interesting thing is the composition of the court. And this is how I have, categorized the composition of the court. 1/3 would be career diplomats. And so diplomats who have been ambassadors and permanent representatives at the United Nations in New York or in Geneva, they would have a very different perception on how to draft the text of a judgment from, let's just say, the other category of judges in the court who were, let's say, practicing lawyers.
How would you define this difference?
The diplomat always thinks of how to put things in a diplomatic way, whereas, let's say, the practicing lawyer is very much sharper.
Yeah.
And is not so bothered, if I could use that word, by whether, how the text will be received. What they care about is whether the language is accurate and sharp.
Yeah.
And then there was the third category of judges who came from academia and the academic background. And, I worked for a judge like this at Cambridge, Professor Crawford, who eventually became a judge at the International Court of Justice, who would be very, very, very strong on the conceptual aspect, of the judgment and how the principles worked and how the mechanics of international law worked. So, you had these three broad categories of judges working on the same text, and it's just trying to produce one text that all three categories are happy about. It was a task. That's why at the International Court of Justice you have what we call separate opinions or dissenting opinions. If you don't agree, you vote against and you file a dissent. If you agree, you file you vote yes, but you add a separate opinion in order to add your own rationale, your own ratio that you feel is missing from the majority judgment. Yeah, so that was my first job, really.
I mean, as a first job, it's not exactly, working as the bartender here in Napa, right? Very, very different kind of bar.
I want to add something about what I learned.
Yes, please do.
Apart from how judgments are made. I mean, looking at the state of the world right now also, I got very, very disillusioned about what law can achieve. And about, okay, you've issued the judgment. It's perfectly drafted or, as perfectly as it can be drafted. But, the UN lacks an enforcement mechanism other than, the Security Council voting for a resolution or the GA voting for a resolution, adopting measures for the implementation of the judgment. And so there's no police in the state structure that we are accustomed to in Cyprus. You have Cyprus government, you have Cyprus police. If the law is breached, the police comes after you. There's no international police that's going to come after you as a state if you don't enforce a judgment.
No.
And I'm not going to name the names of cases that I worked on, but some of them are in the news these days. And so I saw certain judgments fall into a big black void and, never implemented or applied. And that gave me the proverbial slap in the face as to the impact of my work and how far, let's say, international law can go. I switched not professions, but I switched the environment I was working, the institution, let's say, I was working at.
Tell me, like, when we first met, you were working with migrants and refugees.
Yes.
How did you move into that kind of area?
So after I finished my work at I was working at the International Court of Justice as a law clerk, right? That was my first job. When I finished that, I returned to Cyprus and I qualified as a barrister.
Was the plan always to return to Cyprus?
Not really.
No.
Not really. So I qualified as a barrister, and because I qualified in commercial litigation, I wanted to do international law, so I moved to Cambridge for 2 years, and I was on the research aspect of things at the Lauderpath Center for International Law. And then I moved back to The Hague for 4 years. So I did a total of 5 years at the International Court of Justice. And at the end of that contract, I moved back to Cyprus. And when I moved back to Cyprus, I was looking for work, and this job opportunity came up. At the beginning, when I started working for it, it was called the European Agency for Asylum, EASO. And then while I was working there, it became renamed as an agency called the European Union Agency for Asylum. So I did that for 3 years upon my return to Cyprus after 13 years of absence. And it was quite the experience. I just told you about my disillusionment with regards to international law and about the limited impact it had. In the field of asylum, you see directly the human being that is affected by breaches of international law, and at the end of the day, being affected by the decision that is made by the agency, whether they're going to be deported or not.
Can you tell me more about like the kind of scenario you kind of walked into when you started that job? Like what was the context in Cyprus at the time with refugees and asylum seekers?
There was a huge influx of...
This was around which year?
So I started working there in November 2020. And year of COVID. And I left January 2024. So a couple months more than 3 years. And there was an influx, and there was a lot of asylum applications pending at that time. So we were working on a real backlog because the EU is supporting the Cyprus government with regards to the cases it had pending. And so I mainly dealt with cases of sub-Saharan Africa, so mainly Cameroon, the Anglophone Francophone conflict, Nigeria and the Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I did some cases as well from Iraq and Iran and some Afghanistan. That's what the main casework that I did was. And I did 150 cases in the span of 3 years or so.
How did it affect you emotionally?
This job was not technically difficult. As an international lawyer, when I came from like analyzing the technicalities of the law of the sea to a very straightforward, in my view, implementation of the Refugee Convention and the EU directives on refugee law. So technically, intellectually, as it were, it wasn't difficult. The challenging aspect is dealing with human beings that are affected by very, very traumatic events, such as their houses being burned down, their families killed, them being persecuted, imprisoned, many women having been victims of human trafficking. you name what humans can perpetrate against humans, I've heard it for 3 years. And, it takes a toll on you if you do it for a long period of time. And I considered that after 3 years, I had done my bit and it was time for me to close that chapter.
Let's talk about failure. Can you tell me about a moment that you think your greatest failure, or a failure that you still think about today?
Yeah. So, my first instinct to this question is challenging the word failure, because you're talking to a person who, I live by this motto, which is, in life, you never lose. You either win or learn. So, what people term as failures, I learned, such as learning opportunities. Yeah. And for me, the defining moment, as it were, in my life was when it was 2017. I was exactly 30 at that time. Yeah. And I faced a health crisis, a serious health issue, the details of which are irrelevant for the time being, but it brought me to my knees, and, I saw death in the face. And when that happens, a lot of things fall into place, and you put a lot of things into perspective. And so at that time, I was, still living in The Hague. And so I took a series of decisions. I said, okay, if I'm going to leave, continue living, certain things need to change. And so, I finished my contract at the United Nations, and I closed the chapter of the UN and of The Hague, packed my bags and moved back to Cyprus. So changed countries, changed jobs, went into the field of asylum, and pretty much changed my whole entourage, the people who are around me. So it was a major shift. It was,
a complete
shift of direction.
You were, I hate to say it, like a small fish in a big pond, and then you kind of returned back to, I guess, your home roots.
Yes.
Is that how it felt like, returning to your home roots, or did you feel like it was a complete new change?
It was, what it felt like? It was like a redirection and a re-evaluation. And I changed my priorities. At that time, when it hit me, my top priority was my career. And then there was a reshuffling, and then my top value became my health, because I understood that if I was not healthy, I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't work. I couldn't enjoy life. I couldn't relate to people. You can't do anything if you're bedridden,
Yeah, of course.
Can't run, There was a time, the only thing I could do was to be in bed and visualize I was running. And the fact that I'm running again, for example, is just a miracle, I can, every time I go for a run, I give my thanks to the universe for being alive, And so, it was a reprioritization of my values. So number one, health. Number two, family, because, when you find yourself very ill in a foreign country, nobody's gonna come and rescue you. The only people who are gonna come and rescue you are your family. And so I reevaluated how important it was to be in proximity to my family, and now I'm close to them in Limassol, and that gives me absolute joy. And whenever I'm starting to, people are asking me, "Oh, when are you gonna move abroad?" I'm like, I'm right where I need to be. I'm not moving from Limassol.
What did it teach you about success then? I mean, looking at you, if I was just looking at your CV on paper, like, you seemed to be at the top of your success, right? When you were back at The Hague, And coming back to Cyprus, as you've mentioned now, people are saying, when are you going to move abroad? And that feels like, you're kind of going down, you're stepping down.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you define as success? If not being at the top of the top career-wise? Or am I getting it wrong altogether?
I mean, the definition of success is quite subjective.
Yeah.
My own definition is to be happy and fulfilled with what you're doing.
Yeah.
No matter what that is. You might be sweeping the floors of restaurants for that matter. It doesn't matter what you're doing. The title doesn't matter. What matters is that you feel good with what you're doing. You wake up and you're like, oh, I can't wait to do my work. And I've always been that kind of person who is excited to go to work every morning. I'm not that kind of person who's like, oh, another day at the office. No, I've never felt that.
Yeah.
It's a joy to be able to practice international law. And there was a period of my life that I couldn't work, and that was quite enlightening. And you might think that you hit rock bottom. As you say, I was at the
creme de la creme.
La creme de la creme. I was at the top of my game by the age of 30, and then hit rock bottom. Actually, that gave me a lot of perspective.
Yeah.
And also about my success as a human being, because you might be very successful as a professional, but how are you successful as a human being? Who have you loved? Who have you helped? Who have you spoken kindly to? At the end of the day, that's the impact we have as human beings, and that's our legacy. And what have you done to make yourself happy, you're aware that I published a poetry book in 2022. That's how we first met.
Yeah.
That's when I released myself from the fear of what will people think of the lawyer publishing a poetry book. When you look at death in the eyes, you don't care anymore what people are going to think. Yes, I'm a lawyer and I've published a poetry book. How about that? You become unconstrained from fears that previously bound you and chained you in a prison that didn't exist either way.
Yeah.
You created it for yourself, like I had created it for myself.
Would you say you're successful then now, in your own definition? Are you happy with where you are?
My health is my wealth.
Yeah.
So long as I have that, first box in the list is checked.
Yeah.
The second, I'm very happy. I'm very fortunate. I live in Limassol by the sea, 300 days of sunshine, close to my family. I try to do my fair bit every day. So I'm trying. There's always room for improvement. I have big goals for myself. I know we're close to them, but I do my bit every day. And as my teacher, Tony Robbins, says, it's the 2mm shifts that matter. Do your little bit every day, and it's going to compound in the future.
Nice.
That's my philosophy.
You're a partner, Spencer West. How did you get to that place?
So, I just got a message one day by
I have no idea.
But I this was 2024. I decided to leave the asylum field and not renew the contract. I declined to sign it. And a few months later, I received a message from the founding partner of Spencer West Cyprus, which was founded in 2024, to say, we're looking to expand. Would you care to join us? And so I went in. I had a meeting with the founding partner, the two founding partners. We discussed it. They presented the opportunity to me. I took some time to make my decision. I consulted with my mentor in the United States and several other people whose opinion I trust. And then I decided, okay.
I really want to ask you about what it has been like working as a woman in international law. Can you just give me like if you know any of the background context, like are there a lot of female lawyers within that space, and how have you faced any struggles or challenges, or even any positives from working in that space?
Yeah. So, for example, at the International Court of Justice, when I worked for the 4-year term, not the initial term, there were 15 judges at the bench, right? And at that time, there were 3 women out of 15, right? So at the senior level...
Not even half.
Not even half, not even close to half. At the senior level, the level of the judge, let's say 60 plus, women were underrepresented. At my level, the level of the associate legal officer, the majority was women. So I am anticipating that once the generation shifts, the majority of my cohort will get the senior positions. That I think that's the natural progression, unless, certain forces intervene and, because there's voting that takes place at the General Assembly and at the Security Council in order to become a judge at the International Court of Justice. So I anticipate with the generation shift that there will also be a shift in the composition of the court, let's just say. With regards to the EU where I worked, I don't have figures to tell you because I don't have the composition of the bench to give you, but let's just say our coordinator was a woman at that time, and the majority of the team leaders were women at that time. And I think on the case expert level where I was, because we were the ones handling the cases, I think it was pretty much equal. So at least at the EU level, it was, from my experience, it was more or less equal. So Spencer West as well, because it offers a very flexible working arrangement, it's very, very attractive to women.
Nice.
Who have families to take care of, children, parents, grandparents, and so on and so forth. So I don't have the statistics of how many women to how many men in the ratio, but it's very attractive both to men and women who want to have a more flexible and more, let's say, human arrangement instead of the culture that exists in legal circles and the magic circle firms in London or in New York and so on and so forth, where you're at the office for countless hours and so on and so forth.
And you have to kind of, I guess, choose either family or career. There seems to be more shift towards balancing that out and allowing you to kind of live life whilst also pursuing the career you would like.
Yeah, because any person with foresight and a good understanding of how things function would understand that a happy person is going to be much more productive and efficient. And somebody who has, balance in their life is going to be, is going to produce a better quality of work, So I believe the founders of Spencer West to have that understanding, and 5 stars to them for coming up with this model.
Brilliant. We've talked a lot about happiness. What other values do you kind of bring into your work or into your life that you live by?
Yeah. So I have 3 sets of values I want to
Nice.
talk about. So the first set of values that is like my rock, let's say the foundation of this construction, come from sports, from running. So my number one value is consistency. I'm that kind of person who's gonna consistently show up to practice, whether it be running, whether it be work, whether it be studying in the library to get a law degree. I think that was my saving grace in law school. I think I got a first class honors out of sheer consistency. I was like the most diligent attender of the library back in UCL. So it's been my core value since the beginning, and with that comes discipline.
I was gonna say, because you do sound like a very disciplined person.
Yeah.
Consistent, but also very disciplined.
Yeah. I am a big believer of Aristotle's motto, repetition is the mother of skill.
Yeah.
You cannot become a master of anything unless you repeat it thousands of times, and the minimum is 10,000 hours, as Maxwell says. So discipline for sure, and stamina. My other motto in life is life is not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
The one who wins at the end of the day is the one who runs fastest the last 500 meters. You know that better than I do,
Yeah.
And so we have to think of life in the long run, not the short run. And as with sports, rest is important. And, I learned that a bit later on in life before, working endless hours.
Burnout.
That I have to rest.
Yeah.
So that's the first category that comes from sport, as it were, from running. The second comes from the upbringing, which was very, very much heightened from my work in asylum, in the asylum context. So it starts with gratitude. I remember leaving the office very, very frequently thinking, exiting the office there in Strovolos and being like, thank you, God, that I live in a country where I can express my opinion and not get shut down. I can wear whatever I want and not be put in prison. I have safety, relatively speaking, as in not, going through the line of fire every day or being persecuted. And I have certain liberties that other people do not have. I couldn't take for granted certain things anymore, even having a roof above my head and having a meal. When you talk about people who have gone through starvation and have been on a boat for 50 days to come to this country, well, your perspective changes. So gratitude is fundamental for me.
I remember your poem, is it Red?
Yes.
Yeah, and you kind of hint at a few of those things, and I remember it really, really touched me, and I think gratitude is the one thing that I came out with.
For sure. And with that kind of work comes also empathy and kindness and humanity. Because honestly, Annetta, I have spoken with all ages, people from all ages, various nationalities, every shade of color you may imagine, all genders, all sexual orientations. We are all equal as human beings. We might not be equal in the marketplace, but we are equal as human beings. So that experience taught me to talk to everyone in a very neutral way and ask questions the way you're asking me questions. I used to be in your position, asking the questions in a neutral and impartial manner, no matter who is speaking to me. there were also people who were kings in their kingdoms in local Congo, or like people who had seen absolute poverty. I've seen the kings and queens and the paupers, everybody. It doesn't matter who it is. It gives you also a sense of humility and groundedness, and also to always speak with kindness, because you don't know what the other person you're talking to has gone through. Yeah. I remember the most difficult cases being the ones where, I would start from the morning and it would end in the evening, because I had somebody, I would ask a question and then they would go into a full mode panic attack, starting to shake, sweating, and, reliving the experience. I mean, that's number one symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah. So I had to interrupt the interview, give a glass of water, give tissues. There was a lot of tears, So, so always, the kindness element and the humanity and the compassion. So that's my second, let's say, category. And lately, the last couple of years after I left, because of the work I've been doing, I've developed 2 additional core values, one being certainty, and the other being discernment. And I think these 2, they come with maturity. Yeah. I think it's because I'm nearing 40 now.
Good age.
That I'm developing the skills, how to discern, how to make a judgment call, and how to be absolutely certain about what it is that you are and what you want, and how to set your boundaries and be very strict about them,
Right. What kind of future are you building towards?
So,
sorry to just throw that out to you, but I feel like it transitions nicely from the values.
So how do you make those values? How do you
put the bricks down?
Put the bricks down and make them into a reality. Because change starts from yourself. Gandhi used to say that if you want to change the world, change yourself first. He studied at UCL.
I have to say, I did spend a lot of time at your university's library, so I know. Yeah,
his spirit was with us. No. So, and so you start from yourself first, and then of course it's the community you live in. Yeah. I live in Limassol, and what I'd like to see for the future of Limassol, because that's my community, but also for Cyprus, is to live in a country that has respect for international law, even though it's been weakened the last few years. We've just seen Davos happening, where human rights are upheld and civil liberties is upheld, and there's equal opportunity for all, notwithstanding sexual orientation and any other defining characteristic that is set out in the international treaties and the Equality Directive. That's my wish.
If you could give advice to a young woman looking to who has a dream to become a lawyer or get into human rights or into international law or anything, or just has a dream, what would you say to her?
So what I would advise is, first of all, is this really your passion? If it is your passion, follow it. Yeah. If it makes you happy, if it makes your heart sing, you should do it. But at the same time, in classical Greek, we say miden agan. So everything in moderation. So, take time to work, but also take time to rest, and also take time to enjoy life. Yeah. This is something I started doing after the age of 30, because, life came and hit me in the face. And once you realize you might not get a second opportunity, you're like, okay, I might as well do it now that I can. So the advice is, don't postpone something you can do today to tomorrow. If you can do it today, do it today. Because, at the end of the day, and this is something that recent experience has taught me. I know it sounds a little bit macabre, but this is the kind of thing that put things into perspective for me. In 22, I lost my grandpa, and in 24, I lost my grandma. And I'm not one of those people who are going to tell you I have no regrets in life. Of course I do. You know what I regret? I regret not going to see my grandpa more often, because now that I don't have him, I can't do it anymore. So if you can do it today and you can be present for another human being today, do it today, because tomorrow might be too late. And in my case, I wish I had my grandpa around and gone and seen him, but I can't anymore. And, I was too focused on the career, and, the human beings that you love are not going to be there forever. So I know it's a little bit macabre, but it's an advice I wish somebody had given me before it came and hit me,
You know what? That's the exact advice I wish somebody had hit me. Hit me as well. Slap me with it in the face, because it's something that I regret. If I have regrets in my life, that is something I do regret. Spending more time with my grandparents, spending more time with people I love who have since, passed.
My teacher, Tony Robbins, says the quality of your life depends on the quality of your relationships. And so giving time to nurture these relationships, especially with people who love you, like family. For me, my grandpa was 2 times my father, My grandma was 2 times my mother. I received so much, both from him and from her, that, I want to give it back now, but I don't have them around to give it back to them. But I think at the end of the day, if you received a gift, pass it on. So pass it on to someone else. What you give, you get to keep. That's what Tony says.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, Alexia, I don't have any more questions for you. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just wanted to thank you for this beautiful interview. And I'm a firm believer that questions are more important than answers, because answers change, but questions always remain valid, and that's the essence of philosophy.
Nice. Never stop questioning.
Never stop questioning.
Nice. Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Future Makers. If you'd like to listen to any more episodes, subscribe, and join us for another one.